This is an exercise called motivating ourselves with kindness and compassion, and it's taken from the Mindful Self-Compassion course. There are interpretations of both mindfulness and compassion-based practice that can reflect a kind of resignation, a kind of passive acceptance. We might conclude that we are the way that we are, and that all we need to do is to accept this with kindness. But this is neither wise nor kind, and in fact it's a misinterpretation. We've all developed strategies that at the time of their making made sense, but now they may no longer be helpful, and they might be harmful both to ourselves and others. There are things that we need and want to change in our lives, and motivating change with kindness and compassion is actually more successful than trying to bully or force ourselves to change using criticism. So the invitation here is to try something different, to motivate ourselves in a different way, and to tap into some of our natural intelligence and wisdom. So to do this exercise, you'll need about 20 minutes or so. Somewhere to sit that's comfortable, where you won't be disturbed, and a pen and paper or a notebook. So take a couple of minutes to get those things if you need them. So to begin, I'd like you to think about a behaviour that is causing you some problems in your life. A behaviour you'd like to change, if you could. A behaviour that when it comes up, you habitually meet it harshly or with criticism. For example, you might, like me, procrastinate, delay, postpone, all sorts of things, emails, decisions, tasks. Or maybe you don't exercise enough, or you drink or smoke too much. These may be behaviours that you'd like to change. So take a couple of moments to select one behaviour that you'd like to change. I know that normally we might have quite a few things on the list, but let's take it easy. Just select one. And try to avoid choosing the most difficult one. Let's start small till we get the hang of this. And then you'll be able to come back to the more challenging stuff later. And make sure it's a behaviour that you'd like to change and not a feature like the size of your feet or your nose. So when you've selected your behaviour that you'd like to change, please write it down. Now I'd like you to think about the times when this behaviour has come up, when you've been critical toward yourself. So you might find it useful to recall yourself doing this behaviour. What do you say to yourself when you've acted in this way? What kind of language do you use? What's your tone of voice like? There may not be words, there might be an image or a sound. perhaps a stiffening or tension in the body. So we're exploring how your inner critic expresses itself. And the voice that you hear might be your own, or it might belong to another. Just noticing how it feels right now to hear these words said in this way, with this tone. Just noticing how you feel, noticing physical sensations, emotion. And you might see that the way that you're meeting this part of your life, this behaviour, is in itself another kind of suffering inflicted by ourselves. And if it's painful, it's useful to see this and to meet this moment with kindness. And we can do that verbally if that works for us. We can say silently to ourselves, wow, this is painful. Or this hurts. Sometimes the greatest kindness is seeing things as they are. And bringing a little tenderness to the reality of criticising ourselves. So let's pull back a bit now. Maybe take a couple of deep breaths, or flex your shoulders, or take a sip of your drink. And let's look again at this situation. Let's inquire into our experience. These are some questions that you can ask yourself. Why is my inner critic doing this? Is my inner critic trying to help me in some way? To keep me safe? What message is my inner critic trying to give me? Is there any way that the intention of my inner critic is actually good? Is it possible that it's trying to help me in the only way that it knows how, even if it feels painful? Just take a moment to see and explore, is there any way that your inner critic is trying to help you? Sometimes we can't find a way in which our inner critic is trying to help. It might be that our inner critic is the voice of someone who wasn't trying to be helpful. And if that's the case, just return to noticing that there's criticism, noticing how that feels, and allowing some kindness for yourself, because this painful strategy is playing out again for now. If you were able to see a way that the inner critic was trying to keep you safe, to keep you connected, let's now do something out of the box and thank the inner critic for trying its best on our behalf. Remember, this is an aspect of you that we're talking about here. and finding some way to thank your inner critic. Just simply thanking the inner critic for trying to help you. If your inner critic is anything like mine, you'll have plenty of chances to practice this again. Over time, I found it was helpful to give my inner critic an imaginary body and clothes and a personality. And once I'd done that, I could relate to her much more easily and warmly. I saw how hard she worked. I eventually gave her a deck chair by a swimming pool so she could chill out. And she took to it amazingly well. I thanked her for watching my back in the best way that she could. My inner critic was so tired. It had took her a long time to get my attention. It took a long time before I could see the strategies I was using. She'd worked alone without my help for a long time. Maybe your inner critic is relieved that you've finally seen them and made contact. Maybe they can relax a little now. And maybe you're relieved that you've finally turned around to meet this part of you. So now that you've met them, now that you're on speaking terms, as it were, let's allow the inner critic to step aside, to sit down, and allow another voice to be heard. Another part of you that has different skills, that's kind and compassionate, that understands that we've developed strategies that have a limited shelf life. A part of you that understands that change needs to happen, but it's not always easy. This is a wise, intelligent and loving part of you that needs a bit of space to operate. It's part of us that sees that the behaviour that you've chosen is causing problems. And the compassionate part of us wants us to change too, because it loves us and wants us to suffer less. And it knows that this is possible. So just for a moment, if you'd like to put your pen and papers down and just settle for a moment, recline back in your chair. And noticing that there are sounds. And sensations in the feet and hands. Perhaps noticing that you're breathing in and out. And that the body is stable and upright. Warm and alive. And that you have this intention to respond more skillfully. It's contacting our human resources. And then, if you would, bring to mind again the behaviour that you'd like to change. And if you like, bring into mind some of the consequences of this behaviour for yourself or others. Now, how might the compassionate, wise part of us meet this behaviour that we'd like to change? Let's see if we can find words to express a different kind of motivation. The compassionate part of us might say, I love you and I don't want you to suffer, and that's why I'd like you, if you can, to make this change. Or, I care about you. How can I help to make this change? Just notice the tone and the words. So listening, letting your compassionate voice emerge or arise. What does it have to say about your struggle with this behaviour that you'd like to change? Sometimes no words come, so if you get stuck, what would you say to your friend, to someone you loved, who struggled with the same behaviour that you struggle with? Now, if you would, writing what you've heard down, making a note of how you'd encourage yourself to make the change with kindness. Just take a moment to write quickly down all that you've heard, all those words of encouragement. And now, if you would, go back and reread the words of kindness, encouragement, and support that you've just jotted down. If there are no words, it's okay. Sometimes it takes time. We open in our own time. Just finishing off any last words that you'd like to capture. And then when you're ready, letting the exercise go. You can stretch, take a couple of deep breaths, just noticing how it feels to have done that exercise.